Chinese AI startup DeepSeek reportedly delaying its next generation R2 model after having trouble training it using chips from Chinese tech giant Huawei. This is a pretty interesting story because the Financial Times reporting that DeepSeek ran into problems as it worked to train the R2 model with Huawei's Ascend chips, which had been pushed by the Chinese government, Joe. The article says that led DeepSeek to fall back on NVIDIA chips for training while using Huawei's chips for inference. That refers to an AI model making its own predictions after it learns from a large amount of data. So this goes back to two issues. One is that basically the first version of DeepSeek probably was built on the back of NVIDIA chips the whole time.
Really?
That's the lesson of this whole situation. And if you remember, we had Alex Huang on our broadcast.
I defer to you on this. This you were right on. You thought you talking about? Not good. The GPT-5 rollout
not as good as I want it to be.
Shows strain, and it's slower, and it says something weird here. It's like a colder tone. Criticize the colder. What does that mean? It's not as friendly. Does it not say "I like you, Andrew" or something? Or
you know, the voice is as friendly as ever. I think she's too friendly. I don't like that voice.
How is that possible? I love it when people.
The woman who talks to me.
I'd love some.
Oh my God! I'm always telling her to stop it. It's crazy.
Really?
Oh, it's so bubbly and over the top. It's outrageous.
You're not used to it. Is the next generation R2 chip the R2D2?
It's not an R2 chip. It's an R2 model.
Model. Is the next generation model the R2D2?
It is not.
How do you know? Wouldn't you do that?
You would, except that it's not ready yet. It's not good enough. And you're going to need an NVIDIA chip to make it work.
Oh, okay.
Think about an R2D2 with an NVIDIA chip in it.
Think about that. It probably had one. We just didn't know because they were so ahead of their time. So,
and another source of revenue has been from the chip makers. NVIDIA and Advanced Micro Devices agreeing to share 15% of their China sales with government in exchange for those export licenses. Mr. Secretary, that's pretty aggressive. This was part of a deal to secure export license for the semiconductor companies. Tell me more about this. Is this going to be a precedent in terms of you're looking at companies to share their profits with government?
Maria, we'll see. These are two very special companies and a very special set of conditions as we look into selling to China. And what I think is very interesting is that we're allowing the sale of the NVIDIA H20s. I'm not sure what the comparable chip is for AMD, and that's about 5 levels down the NVIDIA tech stack. And now the Chinese don't want their companies to buy them, because our rationale for allowing this, other than taking in revenue for Treasury for this strategic industry, was to make U.S. chip makers the global standard. Now the Chinese are looking at this for a minute and saying, whoa, we don't want NVIDIA to become the Chinese standard, but we're also seeing today that the Chinese AI company DeepSeek is having trouble going to the next level using Huawei chips. So they've kind of backed themselves into a corner. They don't want to have a U.S. standard, but their domestic supplier seems to be subpar.
Yeah, I was really taken aback when I first saw that the CCP was telling its local companies, don't use the NVIDIA chip.
Yeah. Well, but what we're seeing, we do not want Huawei to have a digital belt and road. So we are willing to, with our allies and with countries that we believe will protect the technology, we are willing to let the U.S. standard permeate the world. And I think that's one of the ways for the U.S. to exercise both economic and AI dominance.
Yeah, that's a great point there in terms of what you've been able to look at. We're going to be watching that that way of gaining revenue in terms of whether or not you're going to be looking at that for other companies doing business in China. Look, but
we're seeing a lot of crazy stuff. I mean, yesterday NVIDIA was down all day. I said, well, why? Well, it turns out that there was a short story out there that NVIDIA is going to be late with the next chip, which is the Vera Rubin, and that therefore the MI450 by AMD is going to be in ascendance. The story was, I'll just use a word that I think is really kind of indicative of where we are. It was a lie. It was a lie. I mean, you can look up.
Like it's
interesting. You can chat GPT lie and Perplex lie and Gemini lie. It all comes up with the same thing, which is untruth.
Right.
It was untrue. And it caused a lot of people to buy AMD up 9 and sell NVIDIA. Now, there's probably a news story about why NVIDIA is down today, because NVIDIA is so easy to knock down right now because they're an honest company. They don't come in. They're not a hype company. They're like, okay, what do we? They don't come in and say, what do we have to refute today? The fact is that the most major story about NVIDIA is a positive one, which is that DeepSeek can't make the so-called ballyhooed chips that it needs, and they need the H20. In the meantime, the Chinese are buying excess homes. But no, the Chinese are all powerful, and we are just
was the tone of your tweets this morning. It is true that there are reports that the Chinese government is asking some firms to buy homes. AMD, by the way,
Glennon said, we're a bunch of useless idiots.
AMD gets added to the U.S. 1 list over at B of A. Nice profile of Lisa Su. I think it's in Wired.
No, she's fantastic. I'm adding it to my Highway 66 the U.S. 1 will go Highway 66. Have the Boston Post Road exclamation portfolio. I mean, look, AMD is good, but the idea that stock should have run yesterday off of Vera Rubin being late was just, I don't know who spreads these things.
Yeah.
I spend so much time shooting these things down. It's like I got the call at 4:01 saying, I finally got the call saying, here's what happened. I said, well, 3:59, the call would have been more effective because the market closes. But everyone was focused on Mr. Bullish or whatever.
And you still like technology.
Certain areas of technology.
Certain areas. The chip area for sure. This is the 1-2 punch here. Taiwan Semiconductor, NVIDIA, you can't beat it.
They go hand in hand.
Right.
Taiwan Semiconductor's biggest client is NVIDIA. Taiwan Semiconductor, the largest dedicated chip foundry in the world with a 60% market share. NVIDIA, we just learned, is now expanding and diversifying beyond chips into data centers. A good 1-2 ticket.
All right. These are semiconductors. There's a few of them. This is SMH's one, but you can even look at this. Just what layman can see, the breakout was phenomenal, and it just keeps going and going and going. It's all about chips right now.
Yeah, look, semiconductors are the underlying commodity, not just the technology sector, but the global economy, as we know. What I've been telling clients is that in Q1, at the hands of the tariff tirade, which has clearly passed, you went through a dark chapter, every bit as sinister as what we saw in the bear market of 22. The moves coming out of episodes, bear markets like that, are measured in quarters and months, not days and weeks. There's significant upside for semiconductors.
I'm looking at NVIDIA, and I think all roads lead there, obviously. I'm just trying to think about, in the context of a NASDAQ rally, and as this stock continues to elevate into its number, do you grow more nervous as a result of that?
For NVIDIA, actually, I think NVIDIA should be fine. Like it's the supply constraints and yield issues that they've had on some of the GB300 racks as they were ramping those constraints look like they've eased. The orders, I think, are coming through. They're shipping those racks like gangbusters. And if they've got their China licenses back, and it looks like they may have to give some of the revenue up. Like we'll see how that works. But nobody has any China AI in the numbers for NVIDIA right now. So I suspect that means that there can be upside as we go through the year. And if you look at the valuations right now, even on the current numbers, NVIDIA is not expensive, like relative to any of the other AI names. It's probably one of the cheaper AI names out there.
No, but I mean, since you mentioned the deal that NVIDIA, deal in quotes, I guess, that NVIDIA seems to have made with the White House. I mean, there is the other side of it where China, and I've already read some whispers of this now, which is, yeah, that's great. You can cut whatever deal you think works for you and President Trump and the administration, but maybe we're not going to let our companies buy what you thought we would.
Yeah, well, again, what's in the numbers right now is zero. So, okay, they'll sell some. And we saw some of that news flow. It wasn't a ban from the Chinese government to the customers. It was more of a suggestion at this point. I actually do think...
Is there really a difference? Is there really a difference?
They tend not to be that prescriptive, frankly. And I actually think the demand for the NVIDIA parts is there. I do think that the customers in China want to buy the parts. And like I said, right now, at least in the estimates, it's effectively zero. So I mean, anything that they get is upside. Even if they wind up giving some of it off to the Trump administration, it's upside. And then we'll see what they can do, by the way, in terms of pricing and everything else to try to offset some of that revenue haircut.
What about more advanced chips? Because the H20 obviously is obsolete, really, at this point. Can you ever envision a day where that happens?
Where they're, well, so NVIDIA supposedly was already redesigning Blackwell parts, their next generation, to sell into China, although I suspect the performance of those Blackwell parts was actually probably lower than the H20. They've haircut them. In terms of like selling the more advanced stuff, look, it all depends on the Trump administration. Like, I wouldn't hold my breath, although I guess Trump was out there supposedly praising Blackwell today. We got, the one big beautiful chip now, I guess. But I wouldn't be holding my breath for them to sell like the really high end stuff. I mean, part of the way they're getting this like through everything else is to make the point, which is accurate, is that the H20 is an old chip, it's old technology, and it's not critical in terms of performance relative to what else can be obtained elsewhere in the world.
But you openly wondered when this whole thing happened, and I think you called it a slippery slope in a note that you had put out. Now that you've had some time for it to marinate a little bit more, are you still thinking about, and by the way, I mean, the Treasury Secretary was asked the very question, is this going to be a template for other kinds of companies? And he didn't really walk away from it.
No, he did not. No, so look, I'll take it. Like 85% is better than zero, but I don't have to like it. I don't like it. I do think it's a slippery slope, and like I don't know where it stops. Like it's in theory, if you can get away with charging 15% on China AI sales, why couldn't you charge 15% or anything you wanted on anything? Ultimately, I don't know where it ends. So I don't like it. I'll take it at this point for NVIDIA. I guess for AMD as well. I don't have to like it, and I don't.
All right, I hope you're all doing great today. So overnight, the Financial Times reported that DeepSeek tried developing their new R2 model using Huawei chips instead of relying on NVIDIA's, and now the release of that model is delayed. I have no idea if the story is correct or not, but that said, the FT have been fantastic recently when it comes to accurately reporting on NVIDIA rumors, so that is worth bearing in mind. And if this story is correct, then it underscores the importance of NVIDIA's moat around software. And very quickly, that brings me to AMD. I think there is plenty of room for both NVIDIA and AMD to succeed in this market as demand is so strong. And so I'm bullish on both NVIDIA and AMD. That being said, even after AMD launches their first rack scale system next year in 2026, they will still face the challenge of NVIDIA's software moat. CUDA is extremely beneficial to NVIDIA as it helps keep developers within the NVIDIA ecosystem. Millions of developers around the world build on CUDA. And if they build on CUDA, they want to remain on CUDA. And based on multiple blog posts NVIDIA published earlier this week, it appears that NVIDIA is working to deepen their CUDA moat even further. CUDA is massively beneficial to NVIDIA, and it doesn't get enough attention. Now I want to recap what happened yesterday in the news we got about NVIDIA's Rubin, in case you missed it. So yesterday, we learned that a Taiwanese firm named Fubon Financial published analysis suggesting that NVIDIA's Rubin may be delayed due to a redesign. Then yesterday afternoon, CNBC reported that they received a statement from NVIDIA saying that the report is incorrect and that Rubin is on track. That is a big relief. I'm honestly surprised that NVIDIA said anything during quiet period, but I'm glad that they did respond, as it is very helpful to investors. Hopefully, they will respond to reports like this in the future as well, regardless of whether they are in quiet period or not. Looking ahead, be sure to mark your calendars for October 28th, as Jensen Huang is scheduled to deliver a keynote address at GTC in Washington, D.C. Usually when Jensen delivers a GTC keynote, he reveals something new, and he also usually announces large-scale projects that are unique to the region where the GTC event is being held. Since this GTC event is in Washington, D.C., I wonder if we will get news about any new large-scale sovereign AI projects with the U.S. government or large-scale projects with U.S. companies. Both of those would be very positive for NVIDIA, so mark your calendar for the morning of October 28th. Now I'm once again going to share my thoughts on the U.S. government taking 15% of NVIDIA and AMD's China revenue. Please hear me well. I am politically independent, and nothing I say is motivated by politics. I'm purely speaking about policy here. I am not a fan of companies being required to give revenue to the government. It would be one thing if we were talking about the government taking a portion of profit, but we're talking about the government taking revenue, not profit, and I think that is a very slippery slope to go down. This sets a very dangerous precedent that could easily be abused by a future administration and taken to a far greater extreme. I don't think most people understand the full implications of what's happening here. Even if this administration doesn't abuse it, they're setting a precedent that could easily be abused and ratcheted up to the extreme by a future administration. This is playing with fire, and I sincerely hope that the administration will reconsider the decision to take a portion of these companies' revenue. I understand that the argument is that this is to the benefit of the American taxpayer, but the reality is that the U.S. could provide substantially more value to the American taxpayer by simply allowing these companies to keep their China revenue. On NVIDIA's most recent earnings report, the company said that they would have guided for $8 billion in China revenue in Q2 if there were no export control in place. 15% of $8 billion would be $1.2 billion. That would be a run rate of $4.8 billion annually. NVIDIA trades at a current multiple of roughly 59 times earnings. And if NVIDIA doesn't raise prices, this $4.8 billion would come directly out of NVIDIA's earnings. An additional $4.8 billion in earnings at a PE of 59 times would result in $283.2 billion added to NVIDIA's market cap, providing substantially more money to American taxpayers than the $4.8 billion the government would be taking from NVIDIA in this scenario. That's not even accounting for the value added to AMD's market cap. And it's also not accounting for the value that would be added to the broader market, as NVIDIA accounts for nearly 8% of the S&P 500 and a massive 14% of the NASDAQ. Meaning, we would easily see hundreds of billions of dollars in value added in the public markets if the government would simply allow NVIDIA and AMD to keep their China revenue. This would provide substantially greater value to American taxpayers. The U.S. government could allow these companies to keep their China revenue, resulting in hundreds of billions of dollars in added public value, where the government can just take the combined roughly $6 billion a year from NVIDIA and AMD's China revenue. If we truly want to do what is best for the American taxpayer, then the choice is clear. Just let them keep the revenue. Now, of course, if NVIDIA raises prices for the H20, that does change the math slightly. But even then, the overall point still remains. If the U.S. government truly wants to provide value to U.S. taxpayers, then allowing NVIDIA and AMD to keep their China revenue would be a better way to do it. I'm all for paying off the national debt, and I'm all for making deals that are beneficial to taxpayers. I just don't think that this specific deal is the best option for America, and I respectfully hope that the administration will reconsider its decision to take 15% of NVIDIA and AMD's revenue. I hope they will choose to do what is truly best for the American taxpayer in this situation. On this topic, I'm not even sure if the 15% revenue cut is constitutional. Article 1, Section 9, Clause 5 of the Constitution states, quote, "No tax or duty shall be laid on articles exported from any state." Now, this is a unique situation because NVIDIA's chips are designed by NVIDIA, which is an American company, and those chips are exported around the world to the benefit of said American company. But the chips themselves, at least in the case of the H20, are not manufactured in the US, so I don't know about this one to be honest. But I guess we will see what happens. And on the topic of legality, I heard a reporter on Bloomberg today briefly mention that the situation is currently under court scrutiny. I haven't been able to verify that, but it would not surprise me if that is happening, given the questions surrounding the legality and the constitutionality of the situation. I continue to be bullish on the long-term future of NVIDIA as AI demand is extremely strong and growing. And I view NVIDIA's China revenue as additional upside to what is already a great long-term setup. All of NVIDIA's largest customers raised their CapEx guidance this earnings season, and some of them even spoke about expecting significant CapEx in 2026 as well. OpenAI's Altman recently posted on X saying OpenAI will be roughly doubling its compute fleet over the next 5 months, which is very positive for NVIDIA. And on that note, I want to very briefly address the lackluster launch of GPT-5 as it has garnered some criticism, and I want to make a very important point here. GPT-5 may not be the best model in the world on benchmark, but think about who OpenAI's target customer is, the general public. Does the general public care if it's the best model in the world? Some do, sure. But I would imagine that the majority of consumers don't care about how AI models perform on benchmark at all. OpenAI has a massive benefit in having first mover advantage. As a result, many consumers use ChatGPT and they consider ChatGPT to be synonymous with AI. Meaning GPT-5 doesn't need to be the best model in the world in order for OpenAI to continue growing. And subsequently, GPT-5 doesn't need to be the best model in the world in order for OpenAI's need for compute to continue growing. Don't get distracted by the noise. AI demand continues to grow, and mass adoption continues to increase. I'm expecting a surge in compute demand in the near future fueled by the introduction of AI agents to the general public. I think this surge in compute demand will extend well into 2026. And I think 2026 will be another growth year for NVIDIA, as I've been saying for many months now. And I especially like the setup for NVIDIA through the remainder of this year. Blackwell Ultra has launched, and production should ramp substantially in September. Vera Rubin is scheduled for release in 2026, and NVIDIA has told us that Rubin is on track. After that, we have Rubin Ultra in 2027 with a single Kyber rack containing 576 Rubin GPU dies. That is 4 times as many GPU dies as the current Blackwell systems. And then we have Feynman in 2028. So we have a clear data center product roadmap extending into 2028. Jensen believes the world's computing CapEx will reach $1 trillion annually by 2030, meaning he's expecting an expanding total addressable market underpinning all of this. cycles. And the fact that Jensen believes CapEx will increase over the next 4.5 years inherently means that he also thinks AI demand will increase during that time. I seriously think we are in the very early days of AI, and I genuinely think NVIDIA still has a lot of runway ahead of it. At least that's my view of the situation. Remember to stay calm in this market. Remember to maintain a long-term perspective, and do not make any hasty or irrational decisions. With all of that being said, I hope you all have a great rest of the day, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts about NVIDIA in the comments below. Please leave a like on this video so more people will see it. And while you're down there, please consider subscribing. It's free, and you can always change your mind. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.